Malcolm Reed stepped off the school bus and onto the cracked pavement of Crestwood High's parking lot, gripping the straps of his backpack a little tighter. The air was thick with humidity, and the late August sun beat down on the rows of parked cars. He adjusted his hoodie despite the heat, trying to shake the weight pressing down on him. This wasn't Chicago. It wasn't even close. The town of Crestwood, Georgia, was small enough that everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. Malcolm and his mom had moved here 2 weeks ago, and he had already felt the whispers. He wasn't stupid. He knew that being one of the only black kids at a mostly white school meant eyes would always be on him, and not always in a good way. But he didn't care about that. He only cared about one thing: running. As he walked toward the entrance, he saw a few students in maroon and gold Letterman jackets, leaning against a row of lockers near the front doors. Their laughter cut through the air like a blade. One of them, a tall blonde kid with an easy smirk, nudged his friend and nodded toward Malcolm. "Looks like we got ourselves a new recruit," the blonde kid said. Malcolm ignored him and walked inside, his sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. First practice. The Crestwood track was a far cry from the city facilities Malcolm was used to. The lanes were faded, and the bleachers sagged like they had seen too many losing seasons. But the moment he stepped onto that red surface, he felt at home. Coach Carter stood near the finish line, stopwatch in hand, his broad shoulders squared under a Crestwood high polo. He was a hard-looking man with a sharp jawline and a scowl permanently set on his face. Everyone knew Coach Carter's reputation: 3 state championships, one of the best track programs in Georgia. But Malcolm had also heard the other rumors, that he played favorites, that he had a type of runner he preferred, and Malcolm wasn't it. "All right, listen up," Coach Carter barked. "I don't care what you did before you got here. All that matters is what you do on this track. We'll start with 200-meter trials, 3 heats. I want times on all of you." Malcolm rolled his shoulders, eyeing the competition. Most of the guys looked solid, but it was clear that one name carried the most weight: Nick Carter, the coach's son. Nick stood at the front of the group, stretching lazily like he didn't have a single concern in the world. His blonde hair fell messily over his forehead, and there was an effortless arrogance in the way he moved. Malcolm had faced guys like him before, people who thought they owned the track. "New kid," Nick said, turning toward him. "You any good?" Malcolm met his gaze, his expression calm. "Guess we'll find out." Nick grinned. "Hope you can keep up." The first 2 heats went by quickly. Nick dominated his, cruising past the finish line with barely a strain. The second heat was less impressive, a mix of sprinters who would probably end up as backups. Then it was Malcolm's turn. He stepped onto the starting blocks, taking a deep breath. His heart wasn't pounding from nerves, just anticipation. This was his moment. Set. The gun fired. Malcolm exploded forward, his stride long and powerful. He could feel the wind slicing past his face, the rhythm of his feet pounding against the track. Everything else faded away. There was no Crestwood, no Nick Carter, no coach watching from the sidelines. Just speed, just movement. The finish line came faster than he expected. When he crossed it, silence followed. Coach Carter checked his stopwatch, his lips pressing into a thin line. Nick's smirk had disappeared. "We'll run that again next week," Coach Carter said, his voice even. "Hit the showers." Malcolm wiped sweat from his brow. He knew what that meant. He was fast, faster than Nick, and Coach Carter didn't like that. As he grabbed his water bottle, Nick walked up beside him. His voice was low, controlled. "Don't get comfortable, Reed," he said. "This is my team." Malcolm chuckled. "We'll see about that." Off the track. Later that evening, Malcolm sat on the small porch of their new house, sipping a bottle of water. The neighborhood was quiet, with wide streets and picket fences, the kind of place his mom had always dreamed about. She worked late shifts at the local hospital, so Malcolm spent most evenings alone. His phone buzzed. A text from his best friend back in Chicago, Darius. Darius. "Yo, how's the new school?" Malcolm. "Different." Darius. "That good or bad?" Malcolm. "Both." He didn't feel like explaining at all. Before he could type another message, he heard the roar of an engine. A black truck rumbled down the street, slowing as it passed his house. Malcolm squinted. He could make out two figures inside, one of them leaning out the passenger window. "Hope you're enjoying Crestwood," a voice called. Then the truck sped off. Malcolm exhaled, gripping his phone. He didn't need to see their faces to know exactly who they were. This wasn't just about a race. It was about something bigger, and Malcolm wasn't backing down, too. Malcolm kept his head down at school the next day. He wasn't scared. He had dealt with worse back in Chicago, but he wasn't stupid either. Crestwood wasn't just some random town. It was the kind of place where things didn't change unless you forced them to. He could feel it in the way people looked at him, in the whispers when he walked by. At lunch, he sat alone at a table near the back of the cafeteria. His tray was mostly untouched, his appetite lost somewhere between exhaustion and irritation. "Mind if I sit here?" Malcolm looked up. A girl stood in front of him, holding a tray. She was black, with dark brown skin and long braids pulled into a loose ponytail. Her Crestwood track hoodie was a size too big, the sleeves pushed up past her elbows. "Go ahead," Malcolm said. She sat down, setting her tray beside his. "I'm Jada, by the way, 400-meter sprinter. You?" "Malcolm, 200 meters. Jada smirked. "Yeah, I know. You smoked Nick Carter yesterday." Malcolm sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Word travels fast. Fast as you." Malcolm chuckled. It was the first real laugh he'd had since moving here. Jada took a bite of her sandwich, then leaned forward. "Look, I won't sugarcoat it. You're good. Real good. But Crestwood doesn't like outsiders coming in and taking what they think belongs to them, especially guys like Nick." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "So what? He runs the school?" She scoffed. "More like his dad does. Coach Carter is practically royalty around here. Nick's been the golden boy since middle school. He doesn't lose. And when he does, people find a way to make sure it doesn't happen again." Malcolm leaned back in his chair. "Sounds like a problem." Jada studied him for a moment. "Only if you let it be." Training day. The sun hung low in the sky as the team gathered at the track for afternoon practice. The tension from yesterday still lingered, but Malcolm ignored it. He had a job to do. Coach Carter stood with his clipboard, eyes scanning the runners. "All right, boys, relay drills. I want clean handoffs, no excuses." Malcolm was placed in the second leg of his relay team, right behind Nick. As they took their positions, Nick turned to him, smirking. "Try not to slow me down, city boy." Malcolm just smirked back. "Try to keep up." The whistle blew. Nick took off first, his legs pumping furiously as he built speed down the curve. Malcolm waited, bouncing on his toes, his heartbeat steady. As Nick closed in, Malcolm took off, his hand stretched back. For a split second, he expected the baton to land smoothly in his grip. It didn't. Instead, Nick shoved the baton too hard, slamming it against Malcolm's wrist. The baton tumbled to the ground. A mistake, a costly one. The other runners surged past as Malcolm scrambled to scoop it up. By the time he got moving again, the race was already lost. Coach Carter's whistle cut through the air. "What the hell was that?" he barked. Malcolm clenched his jaw, turning to Nick, who shrugged. "Guess he wasn't ready," Nick said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Malcolm stepped forward, his fists curling, but Jada appeared beside him, grabbing his arm. "Don't," she whispered. Coach Carter crossed his arms. "Reed, you mess up a handoff like that in a real meet, you'll be lucky to make the JV squad." Malcolm gritted his teeth. "That wasn't on me." Coach Carter's expression didn't change. "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, get used to working harder." Practice continued, but Malcolm's mind wasn't on running anymore. It was on Nick. It was on proving a point, and he wasn't just going to beat Nick. He was going to break him. 3. Malcolm didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying practice over and over in his mind. The baton hitting the ground, Nick's smirk, Coach Carter's disapproving glare. It burned inside him, twisting his frustration into something sharper. He had never been the type to let someone walk all over him. Back in Chicago, if someone disrespected you, you made sure they knew who they were dealing with. But this was different. He wasn't just dealing with some arrogant kid. Nick had power, he had connections, and worst of all, He had his father backing him up. Malcolm wasn't stupid. He knew the game that was being played. They wanted him to quit. They wanted him to feel out of place. They wanted him to know he didn't belong here. Too bad. Malcolm wasn't going anywhere. Breaking point. The next day at practice, the air was thick with tension. The team was scheduled for 100-meter sprint trials. Just a straight-up race, no relays, no excuses. It wasn't Malcolm's event, but he didn't care. Today he was going to make a statement. The runners lined up at the start, stretching and shaking out their muscles. Nick stood a few lanes over, rolling his shoulders like he didn't have a single concern in the world. Coach Carter paced along the side of the track, stopwatch in hand. All right. I want full effort, no holding back. Let's go. Malcolm stepped into his blocks, inhaling deeply. He could feel Jada watching from the bleachers. He could feel every eye on him. Set. The gun fired. Malcolm launched forward like a bullet. He felt the explosion of power in his legs, his arms pumping, his body slicing through the thick Georgia heat. He barely noticed the others beside him. His focus was locked ahead, every muscle working in perfect harmony. And then he passed Nick. Just like that. Nick had a good start, but Malcolm's top speed was something else. His strides stretched longer, his momentum unstoppable. He crossed the finish line first, by a lot. The moment he slowed down, he turned back. Nick came in second, his face twisted in disbelief. Silence. Then murmurs. Coach Carter checked his stopwatch, his expression unreadable. Malcolm walked past Nick, his voice low. Still your team, huh? Nick's jaw tightened. Yeah. Malcolm knew this wasn't over. The aftermath after practice, Malcolm was stuffing his track shoes into his bag when he heard someone behind him. That was impressive. He turned. Jada stood with her arms crossed, a smirk on her face. Thanks, Malcolm said, zipping up his bag. But also stupid, she added. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. How's that? Jada sighed, sitting on the edge of the bleachers. You embarrassed him. In front of the whole team. You think Nick's just gonna let that slide? Malcolm exhaled. He knew she was right. Jada leaned forward. Nick's not just some spoiled rich kid. He's dangerous in his own way. And his dad? She shook her head. Coach Carter's not the type to let someone like you come in and shake things up. Malcolm clenched his jaw. He hated this. Hated that he had to think about this. I didn't come here to play politics, he muttered. Jada gave him a knowing look. Then you picked the wrong town. She stood up, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Watch your back, Reed. Then she walked away, leaving Malcolm alone with the weight of what had just happened. 4. The sun hung low over Crestwood High's track, casting long shadows across the lanes. It was the day of the 200-meter time trials, and the atmosphere felt different, charged, tense, like a storm about to break. Malcolm had felt it all week. The stares, the whispered conversations that stopped when he walked past, the quiet hostility from teammates who weren't sure if they should support him or fall in line behind Nick. Nick, meanwhile, had barely spoken a word to him since Malcolm dusted him in the 100-meter race. But Malcolm knew better than to think he had moved on. Nick wasn't the type to let things go. Coach Carter stood near the starting line, his stopwatch in hand. His expression was unreadable, but Malcolm didn't expect anything different. He knew exactly where he stood with Coach. The team gathered around, waiting for the biggest showdown of the season so far. All right, Coach Carter said, his voice sharp. 200-meter trials. I want all-out effort. Top 2 times will be locked in for the first meet. No excuses, no mistakes. He scanned the group, his gaze landing on Malcolm. That means clean running. Malcolm exhaled through his nose. He knew exactly what that meant. Don't win. Don't shake things up. Stay in your place. Too bad. Because today Malcolm was taking everything. The showdown. He stepped into his blocks, rolling his shoulders, steadying his breath. Nick was 2 lanes over, loose, relaxed. But Malcolm saw the way his fingers flexed at his sides, the way his jaw tightened just slightly. He was nervous. Good. Set. Malcolm's heart pounded. The gun fired. He exploded out of the blocks. Everything blurred. The track, the crowd, the sky above. He pushed harder than he ever had, his legs stretching for every inch of advantage. Nick was right beside him. For the first 50 meters, they were neck and neck. By 100 meters, Malcolm had inched ahead. By 150 meters, he could feel Nick struggling. The finish line was right there, and then Nick drifted into his lane. Malcolm felt the bump, a hard, deliberate shoulder into his side. His stride broke. His momentum wavered. For a split second, he stumbled, just enough for Nick to surge past him. Nick crossed the finish line first. Malcolm followed half a step behind. Coach Carter blew the whistle, checking his stopwatch. "Looks like Carter takes it," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's your top time." Malcolm's hands curled into fists. It was obvious. The contact, the lane violation, the dirty play. And yet, nothing. No call, no disqualification, nothing. Just Coach Carter writing down the results like it was all clean. Malcolm turned to Nick, who was breathing hard, hands on his knees. He looked up, eyes gleaming with something dark. "You don't belong here, Reed," he muttered, just loud enough for Malcolm to hear. Malcolm clenched his jaw. He could say something, could argue, could fight. But as he looked around, at Coach Carter's blank expression, at the way his teammates just turned away, at the unspoken rule that had just been enforced, he realized something. This was never going to be fair. Not in this town. Not under this coach. Not in a system that had been built to keep people like him from rising. So Malcolm did the one thing they didn't expect. He smiled. Not because he lost, but because Nick knew the truth. He had to cheat to win. He wasn't better. And Malcolm? He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The future. That night, Malcolm laced up his running shoes and went to the track alone. The floodlights cast a cold glow over the empty lanes. He set his feet in the blocks, took a deep breath, and ran, faster than ever, because he didn't need their approval, didn't need their rules, didn't need their validation. Nick might have won today, but Malcolm was going to win when it actually mattered. Because one day, he wouldn't be running on some small-town high school track. He'd be running somewhere bigger, somewhere that no one could deny his greatness. And when that day came, Nick wouldn't even be in his rear view.